Hi, I'm Liam Dann. Welcome to Money Talks. This is a podcast about our relationship with money. We're not going to tell you how to get rich, and we're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. In this series, I'll be talking to some interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned about it through the years. Today, I'm joined by the founder and managing director of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme, Sam Stubbs. Sam's been in the news a bit this week as Simplicity has launched a $12 billion fund aimed at building around 25,000 houses. Hi Sam, well look, great to have you here. Can we jump right back and start with your first memories of having money? Do you recall, the first time you might have held a bit of cash in your hand?
Yeah, so there was never too much money in my house. I grew up in Sunnyvale in West Auckland. So the first time I remember money is getting my first pay slip. And it was from Food Town in Kelston, and it was for 99 cents an hour. That's what I got paid to, pack groceries. And I remember, maybe it was like $7 or $8. And I remember looking at it and thinking that was a fortune, So, it's. Those very early memories really shape you, don't they?
Yeah, was that a after school job?
Yeah, it was an after
scenario?
school job. Yeah, and then my second one was actually the one that actually taught me the most about work. I was working in those days. 12 and 13-year-olds could work in factories, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So I worked in doing wire stripping to make vending machines.
Yeah,
and I sat there just stripping wires for 8 hours a day, and there was a clock right in front of me, and that was the thing that taught me that I'm definitely going to university, and I do not want to be doing this for a living, right? So that was a very formative.
Learning what you do not want to do.
Yeah.
And when you got the money, when you got 99 cents an hour, but when you got that $7, were you a saver or a spender? Did you have things you were splashing out on?
Yeah, I'm a real weird one. I've always been a saver, and so believe it or not, at age 11, I bought my first shares. And they were in UEB Industries, which is a paper and packaging company at that stage. And I remember buying them and being fascinated by the share market at that stage. I don't know why, but I just picked it up and
because
I liked
this
numbers.
And I'm just sort of guessing here a little bit before the big boom.
It was. Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I should have
late
done
70s,
more of it. Right?
Early 80s.
Yeah. So that was late 70s, and I should have done more of it. But my parents thought I was crazy. They said I was, throwing my money away and should be putting it in the bank. But I decided to do it, and, I got some early lessons in the share market from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was pre that 84 to 87 period. Shares weren't, it wasn't like, even nowadays with Sharesies, people weren't just doing it, right? You had to make a bit of an effort to get shares.
It was hugely weird, because I saw, first of all, you had to, the Herald had the share table in it, so you had to pick up the Herald, get the price, and then you had to find a broker that would take you on. You try applying for a stockbroking account when you're aged 11. So you do that, and then I managed to do that because there was this little outfit that would sell you the ends of parcels and shares. Managed to find that, and then invest in it, and then you got all your news, once a day, one day in hindsight. So
you kind of had a fascination with the financial sector or money. Was that driven by a desire to get things, to buy things, or just interest in its own sake?
Yeah, look, I think it was. I think greed was a pretty big motivator in my life, a greed for money, and that's because I grew up amongst the working poor, right? So it's interesting. In our street, Seymour Road, I think it must have been about 104 houses. And I would say that the majority of them were just on the limit of surviving, right? So money was scarce, there was just enough, but never anything more. And so money bought you luxuries in life. They just bought the things that you couldn't otherwise have. And I also saw the examples of when one thing went wrong, right? Or one person got sick, or one person lost their job, or there was, just one thing tipped the whole family over into a really desperate situation. So for me, money was security, and money was options and choices. So I was pretty keen on it. And you just had to work hard and got some money, and that to me seemed a pretty easy equation, right?
Yeah.
Work, get money, buy the things you want. And so I've always done that. I've always had 2 or 3 jobs, delivering papers in the morning, packing groceries in the afternoon. And really, in hindsight, that just teaches your work ethic, right?
Yeah.
And that which was really cool. So,
were your parents entrepreneurial?
No, my parents were both school teachers.
Right.
I mean, amazing. You know, I chose them really well.
Yep.
So magnificent in terms of the values in life, and it was great having holidays with them and so on. But they were very traditional school teachers.
Salaries and
they bought the house and then they bought the batch.
Conservative sort of financial choices.
Absolutely. Although my mother's pretty savvy even to this day in the share market. Actually,
right.
But but it was a very normal, West Auckland upbringing. Yeah. It was cool. I loved it. Yeah.
And did that all, that sense of wanting to at least, gain some wealth or security, did that influence your choices as you went through school and university and things?
Oh yeah, totally. So I didn't. I went to university and did liberal arts. Actually, did sort of politics and philosophy and stuff, and I did that because I liked it. But back in those days, you could get jobs with those degrees. You could get any job you wanted, right? Yeah. So I wasn't vocationally driven by a job, although I was a dropout from law school. That didn't work for me. But I went and did that and I was very much driven by greed. I mean, I started out working at IBM for a year. They taught me all about computers. But then this company called Fay Richwhite, which was involved in this high-flying world of merchant banking, and they wanted some interns and stuff. So I went in there, and mate, I just went in there because, investment bankers seem to go out with prettier girls and drive faster cars.
Yeah,
so that was entirely greed.
What year would have that been? Because was it like Michael Fay and David Richwhite were on the floor
It was right at the peak, when they were financing the America's Cup, and I mean it was really sexy, and they were in the gold, we call it the Crunchy building on Queen Street, Crunchy Bar building, the gold one. So that was like for a kid from West Auckland, that was just unreal, man. It was so. And so and I learnt a lot there. I also have, in hindsight, I learnt some bad stuff there as well, just in terms of attitudinally, because I think rampant capitalism can do a lot of damage as well as quite a bit of good. Yeah. And so I think I learnt some bad habits there, which took quite a while to remove. But no question.
So
money.
You were there when the 87 crash went down?
No, I wasn't. It was there afterwards. Right. So this was after they'd just done the telecom deal. And they got through it,
obviously, because they went on to do well out of things like telecom.
They'd just done telecom. They'd just done the telecom deal, right? And of course, you can't imagine that, right? Biggest transaction in history and all that sort of stuff. So that was they were an amazingly bright light back then, and some incredibly smart people. I mean, it was I also learnt an awful lot from some very savvy operators there.
Yeah. So I guess you've kind of coming into the career side of things. You've straddled that sort of. I mean, I sort of talk about it a lot and write about it, the shift in New Zealand mentality pre-84 and post-84. Yeah. Did you notice that there was a real opening up and a real... I
mean, absolutely. When I was going to university, there were all these kids investing money in the share market and supposedly making a fortune and like... The thing is you forget, Liam, is that then becomes your base case, right? That just becomes normal because you're in a very formative part of your life. It's only in hindsight when it crashes that you realise how crazy it was. But at the time, that all seemed perfectly normal. I think we got into a massive funk, right, after the stock market crash. It took a very long time, well, basically right through to Rogernomics before New Zealand recovered. I'd give it about 10 years of funk. Yeah, and then we started getting back on the level because I think it just basically destroyed a whole generation's faith in the capital markets. Yeah, they went right back to investing in houses, right? Yeah,
and it's had a huge ramifications.
Oh, massive, man. Because it also, even when you think about their attitude towards KiwiSaver, attitude towards saving in anything other than buying houses was really, really damaged. And that has set us back. We're still seeing the after effects of that now.
Yeah, I mean, we're only probably just starting to see, I guess younger people are doing different things, partly because getting a house in Auckland, for example, seems so remote that they're more likely to be on Sharesies or, I don't know, trading sneakers or anything going.
Exactly. So you're just starting to see that sort of behaviour, and that's risk-taking entrepreneurial behaviour that we really need in this country. We simply cannot get rich by buying houses forever. Yeah. So it's sort of encouraging. But goodness, boy, we got a real thump in the stomach. We were winded for a long time as an economy.
Yeah. Just to leap back again, I mean, have you ever felt like you were actually poor, or what's the poorest you've ever been on the journey through? Were there some times when you were?
Yeah. Look, I always worked so hard. I mean, I think maybe looking at the outside, people may have looked and thought that at times, we lived in a poor neighbourhood, but my mum and dad were awesome. I mean, they never. I never felt that way. No, I never have. I have felt and do feel for the poor, and I think that's because I was surrounded by it as a kid, and it really, when you see the impacts of poverty firsthand when it's around you, it really does sort of sear an imprint on your memory, and that drives me massively because I hate the lack of dignity that comes with the lack of choices and money in life, particularly older on in life. I think you judge a society by the way they treat their old and their infirm, and so I was never poor, and I have made very sure that I have never been poor, but I have felt poverty for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this before. I've written about it in the Herald, but you famously had that career path kept going, soaring through a range of roles, including a brief stint at Hanover, which you've
totally.
talked about. And then you kind of got out.
Yeah.
And can you talk us through? You basically took a sabbatical, or you sort of retired at 47.
Well, I had a genuine midlife crisis, and at that time I got divorced, which was incredibly emotionally wrenching, and so. And really what happened was, I think that, the Hollywood movies, Liam, tell you that there's this epiphany moment, you see something. That didn't happen with me. It was sort of like drip therapy. I kept on looking in the mirror, and I was getting richer and richer and more stuff, and liking the person I saw less and less. And which once again takes me right back to my roots in Sunnyvale. I was saying, look, I'm making myself and my immediate people around me wealthier, but I'm not looking after the people in Sunnyvale, and those are the people. So it built up and built up and built up, and there were periods of depression and that classic hedonistic treadmill. I mean, it sounds a bit wanky when you say money can't make you happy, but because a certain amount of money makes you tremendously happy, right? You get to
getting the choices,
getting those choices, but then after that, it's a bit of a lottery. There are some very happy, wealthy people, but there are some very unhappy ones too, right? And I just happened to fall into becoming unhappier. With that, in the sense that I did not see that there was great purpose in my life by just accumulating more money and more things. Yeah. And when you get them and use them and they're fun for a while, and then they become burdens. The stuff owns you. You don't own it after a while. So,
did you ever have a boat?
Yeah, mate. Yes. Well, yeah,
just think of the example, or a racehorse would be the other one.
Yeah. No, I've had several big expensive boats, and they have owned me. Trust me. So I just got to that point, and then the sale of Tower Investments, which I was running at the time, was really a catalyst to say, okay, I can make a decision here. A whole lot of stuff was happening at that time, which was extremely mentally draining, and so I just decided to take a break, and I did. And then I think it was a combination of taking a break. I had some very influential people around me, including my partner, who was very influential in getting me to go back to my core values, go back to Sunnyvale really, and say, okay, would you be happier looking after those people instead of looking after yourself? And that's what drives me every day now. And man, it's awesome. I mean, everyone has their own way of giving, right? I think when you first interviewed me, I said, look, some people are rugby coaches and some people are network coaches. That's their way of giving. That's just my way of giving. But I can say that doing that, in giving, it's just so much more. I'm just so much happier in this job, which pays a very small fraction of what I used to get paid. But I'm so much happier doing it.
But it's been very successful, Simplicity, in terms of growing and broadening, KiwiSaver, but we've got the building division
and mortgages and private equity and venture capital. There's a whole lot of stuff.
I mean, how do you is money a measure of success there, or is it just a byproduct?
Oh well, listen, mate, I'm as competitive as hell for our returns. I look at the Morningstar rankings and I'm really annoyed when we're not up the top there. So their competitive streak stays. But I think the success of Simplicity is it's an amazing team, and they're just amazing people in there, and that every single one of them could be working for more for someone else, but they choose to do this combination of enough. It's a perfectly fine salary in that, but with great purpose and with great energy. So I'm just the voice, mate. I do the talking, but the team does the walking, and it's going really well. And I think that's actually. It's interesting. I've really had my eyes open to the power of social enterprise and non-profit in this regard. if you think about most businesses in the world now don't need a lot of capital. Like if you've got to build a steel mill or an auto plant, you need a lot of capital, which means you need shareholders. But if you're building a tech-based business or a services-based business, you don't need a lot of capital. That means shareholders are much less necessary. And if you don't have them at all, then suddenly you don't need to make a margin. So you have a massive competitive advantage in terms of you don't need to make a profit. So you have a pricing advantage. But then also you can actually attract a whole lot of people, particularly younger people, who are much happier than I was to work for a fair salary but with great purpose.
Yeah.
You know, the younger generation is smarter. They actually realise what is more necessary. I mean, you know, old buggers like me can sit there and with a glass of red wine and act curmudgeonly and say they don't know what they're talking about and they didn't pack groceries at 99 cents an hour. But the bottom line is they are smarter and they do realise that they want to work but also work for purpose. So social enterprises give that purpose. And it's only when I've seen in simplicity the quality of people that we attract and the massive competitive advantage we have in pricing that you think, whoa, I think this might actually disturb capitalism as we traditionally understand it, that actually private enterprises and non-profit businesses funded by philanthropists initially might be pretty damn disruptive, actually. I would not be surprised to see something like an Apple or a Microsoft or a, you know, emerge actually as a non-profit, which is kind of a weird concept, right? But these businesses don't need a lot of capital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's one of the sort of drivers of simplicity has been to sort of reshape the industry, open investing up to a wider group of people. Can I ask you, you know, when you look at it now and you look at, you know, you think about the people who just didn't have money growing up, or basically the question is, why do you think some people are stuck being poor and some people sort of get rich? And I don't mean the privilege end of it, but just some people will break out of it and some people won't.
I hear you. Look, I have a lot of criticism for our industry on this. I think our industry fundamentally thrives on apathy and ignorance. That actually, you know, it makes so much money. The bank's $10 billion. KiwiSaver manages $700 million worth of fees and this year. You know, and that's basically because people don't know and understand or don't feel empowered to change. And so I think the industry perpetuates in apathy and ignorance, often unintentionally because it's just the way it's been done. I don't think anyone is sitting there saying, you know, they would deliberately want to keep people dumb. But I think the industry has really failed to step up and educate because that's not good for profits. You know, if an informed consumer makes smarter decisions, which means they ask for more for less. So I think the industry is to blame. I think also, to be completely honest with you, you've got to acknowledge that there's always going to be an element of that. So you have to set up your savings culture and your wealth accumulation culture, which accommodates that. And in that sense, I mean, KiwiSaver's got to be compulsory. Like it's, you know, it has 3 million members now, but 1.4 million aren't contributing anything. That means they've got the illusion that they're being looked after, but they're not being looked after. And they are getting poorer while the rest of us are getting wealthier, right? So KiwiSaver now, it's an incredibly wonderful scheme, but it risks discriminating against the poor. It risks being a scheme which makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. So, you know, I think we have to actually force some behaviours. Like, you know, we force people to pay tax because that's good for society, right? We force them to behave the law because it's good for society. Should we force them to save for their retirement? I think we're getting to the point where we need to because, you know, otherwise the rich get richer, the poor get the picture, and then they get the pitchforks, right?
Yeah.
The seeds of revolution are always sown in inequity, right? And we have growing inequity.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how, you know, you can't sit there as a rich person and say, well, the poor have got TV and Netflix and all this sort of thing. If they feel relatively poorer to you, they are going to revolt at some stage, right? There will be rebellion. So I think we need to, if for no other reason than the preservation of society, although I think it's to give people choices and dignity, we have to be honest with ourselves and say this is just a behaviour that we need to require of people. Yeah.
And I mean, when you look at the imbalances in the New Zealand economy and for example, why Japan can get away with you know, some of the debt and things that they have, it's because they've balanced it out with their savings and the capital within their own country. We just don't have that in this country.
No, I think that's a really interesting observation. And look at what that capital does, right? So look at you travel on a Japanese bullet train. Well, that's what that capital has bought you, right? World-class infrastructure in a country that's actually shrinking in population, but they carry on doing it and carrying on investing it because they've got the savings. And look at New Zealand. I mean, the Infrastructure Commission says we have a $220 billion deficit of infrastructure in this country, and yet we have $100 billion in KiwiSaver. Before too long, that's going to be $400-500 billion. and yet one doesn't seem to be investing in the other, right? There's a disconnect going on here. And so I think that when we get the surety of that money arriving, KiwiSaver managers like us will be much more confident about being proactive about infrastructure investing, but equally also the politicians and the policymakers have got to come to the party, right? You know, it was interesting. I was reading the National Infrastructure Statement last year. Now it's 220 pages or something like that. It's got about 20 pages on financing, right?
Yeah.
Not once was KiwiSaver mentioned.
Yeah.
Didn't see the name.
Yeah.
And yet this is the biggest pool of savings that the country will have in its history. Now, I'm incredibly bullish about New Zealand over the next 30 years because when you see what happened to Australia in 1980 and you start to see the benefit of pension savings coming through, as you say, you know, funding the infrastructure. So we've got a rising tide of capital, not a tidal wave. It's not noticeable. It just rises a little bit every day. And look, I'm at the coalface, right? So we get about $4 million a day of net new savings. Every day we're investing, and we have to invest that money. Doesn't matter whether the markets go up or down.
So you think there's a critical mass there that we could reach, that we could see the dial shift a bit? Yeah,
we're getting to the point, you know, the fact that, for example, we're able to commit the money that we do into housing, which is a very long duration asset class, gives me a lot of confidence that other people will do that, other KiwiSaver managers, but also that we can start to take this leap into infrastructure as well. Because the interesting thing about it, Liam, is this is all New Zealanders' money, right? This is not like doing a PPP with an overseas investor where you talk about selling the family silver and all this sort of thing. This is just Kiwis investing in the hood, right?
Yeah.
So there's a really beautiful potential story there. And at its zenith, you can see it in how much better Australian cities are in terms of infrastructure. You can see it in Singapore, Denmark, all over the world where you see these large pools of domestic money funding the next generation of infrastructure. They've found a way, but it does need, you know, we've got to start talking, you know.
Yeah.
We haven't, no one from the government or the policymakers have knocked on our door to want to have this conversation, and yet we're supposedly one of the bigger KiwiSaver managers. So, but equally also, you know, we're to blame as well. We haven't gone and beaten down their doors and say we want to invest this money. So there's a really positive story there, but it has to start with talking.
I mean, we talk a lot about, and you no doubt are involved in all this, the productivity challenge in New Zealand. We're not as productive as so many other nations. Does that come back to the financing, the capital, all that end of it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know, because one part of me would say that expensive capital forces good decisions. So if you want to get productivity, don't put too much money in. Let people use ingenuity, the number 8 wire.
Lean.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem to have happened here, right? It seems to that lack of capital has not encouraged productivity, and I suspect that a lot of productivity does require pretty big licks of capital, eh? But so I don't know about that productivity conundrum. I mean, do you have a view on that, Liz?
Well, there's that. I think it's multi-factor, but and sometimes I step back and I go, well, we're just not Switzerland, we're not Ireland, we are a Pacific island, so we have to sort of accept that and then work out where we go from there. But I think, I'm one of many commentators who bang on about it, but our housing market has not been great. You know, over the last 30 years, we've poured money in. Yeah. We've basically poured it into the Aussie banks' coffers, and that's a huge drain on our current account. And that cycle doesn't help, right?
Yeah, I think you're probably right, mate. I mean,
you're famously not shy of letting the Aussie banks know what you think.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the profits.
And you know what? I've honestly formed an opinion too that we need a capital gains or land tax of some description here, because with the tax settings currently, unless you force people to save in KiwiSaver, they're still going to want to put their money into property. And you know what? For very good reason. There's a massive tax advantage.
Yeah.
And we need to level that playing field if we're going to get capital appropriately allocated into where it gets the best risk-adjusted returns and creates the most growth for New Zealand. So we're not there, and I suspect that the root cause of all this problem are our tax settings.
Yeah.
So and I'm disappointed by
no major party,
politicians
really,
of all stripes not being really honest about the fact that if you look at every other country, you know, the basic tax settings we have GST, we have income and corporation tax, everyone else has that, and that's right, but we don't have capital gains or land tax. We are very unusual in the world for having that.
Yeah.
And that has massively skewed our investment markets. It is why housing is so unaffordable. And we've got to fix that, right? So look, we're doing our bit by building a whole lot more houses and so on. So everyone is going to chip in. But if you want to address the root cause of the problem, is the tax incentives to invest in that regard. So Either we have to make KiwiSaver compulsory so that you're forcing people to save money in a non-housing related asset, or you keep that voluntary and you remove the tax incentive to invest in housing. So, and look, I guess they've gone some way, right? Bright line tests, deductibility rules, all that sort of thing. But I think it has to be really simple. People have to understand they invest in this asset, they get taxed like everything else.
Yeah. Sort of to wrap things up a bit, Sam, and I know I've probably touched on this a bit already, but there's a question: how has having more money changed your outlook on life?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you'd be crazy.
Sounds like it's a game of two halves for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, it sort of is. So it has made me honest with the degree of happiness that you can get with money, but also absolutely acknowledging that you need enough, but then the too much, it becomes a little bit more of a lottery as to whether it's going to make you happy or not. But most importantly for me, Liam, it's just given me the massive luxury to be able to do something like this. I mean, it's a real luxury, right? I mean, there are very few people who are able to change mid-career, go and set up a charity effectively and a non-profit, and then devote years and years of life unpaid to do that, right? So that's so that luxury has been wonderful. I would say, and I'm going to sound a little bit like a preacher on this, that I do actually think that anyone who has enough money to be able to do that needs to have a serious think about their contribution to society and about what they could do over and above or instead of what they are doing. So I think, you should do an audit in life when you get to a position, because, bad things happen when good people do nothing, and people who have the means and the ability and the wherewithal to affect change, they are the people who probably can most likely to affect change, most likely to do good. So you have a tremendous amount of ability and a tremendous ability to affect change. So you should really think about whether you can do that. And so that's what money's done for me.
When you're out and about now, how do you get on with that investment community, the real old school investment community that you're probably, not shy of criticising these days?
Look, I don't. I'm probably the most hated person in finance. And in many ways, I think, if I stop being that, I'm not doing my job, right? I mean, we are deliberately disrupting, and I am absolutely a gamekeeper turned poacher. Like, I am absolutely holding the mirror to the industry and saying, do you actually realise what you're doing here? You are nice people. You have families and all that. Yeah. Individually, you're wonderful. It's never a personal thing. But this industry is extractive. It is taking too much money out of New Zealanders in terms of fees. It is not allocating it correctly. Too much of it's going overseas, not enough of it's coming into New Zealand. And you are tremendously capable people who are able to affect wonderful change for New Zealand with the billions and billions and billions of dollars that you have, that you are mentoring on behalf of people. And I think that's uncomfortable. That's why, I don't get invited to any industry functions, because they kind of know what I'll say and they don't want to hear what I'm going to say. I'd say this also, Liam. I mean, this is the analogy I use, and this is how I wind up the politicians, right? Because I need winding up on this. As said, if a billionaire flies into Auckland on their own private jet, everyone's all over them in terms of their investing in New Zealand, right? But if I told you that 10 billionaires with $10 billion to invest in New Zealand were arriving on one plane, the Prime Minister would be at the bottom with a red carpet, right? They'd be absolutely right. But the irony of that is, what is it about foreign money that's so special? Those 10 billionaires exist in New Zealand. They are the top 10 KiwiSaver managers, but I would define any politician to be able to name 2 or 3 of them. And yet they collectively will be investing, or could be investing, literally hundreds of billions of dollars into New Zealand, and yet they're unknown. Now, why is that? I think that's also because those managers, they don't want to be known. They don't want to get involved in politics. They are sitting on a gravy train at the moment, which is where they're doing just fine, thank you very much. But to me, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for the politicians to not engage them, and it's not good enough for the industry to not say, what positive contribution can we make here? And you know what? It may actually be okay to charge a little less. It may be okay to not make so much money, particularly when there is basically no capital. KiwiSaver fees this year, $700 million amount of capital required, basically zero. It's an unbelievable. I personally think that the marginal profitability on every extra dollar of KiwiSaver fees at the moment is 80 to 90 cents. I mean, it's an unbelievable. Now, if you're in that industry and you want to make a lot of money, God bless you, and they've done it, I understand why you're silent.
Yeah.
I understand why you have a strategic silence, but I'm sorry, this is billions of dollars of other people's money. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
It's not good enough.
And I guess it's different to, KiwiSaver is different to saying you're running a boutique, high-end aggressive fund for high net worth or something,
Yeah, it is. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not worried about, if you're dealing with wealthy people and you agree on fees, I get that, right?
Yeah.
But this basic amount of fee that we're charging to do, which is sort of, pretty much same investing, it's just too much. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the last question. So, say 20 years from now, say you're stepping back from simplicity, handing it on to the people who are running it. What does success look like for you? What do you hope that you'll have left behind?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
I want us to be the biggest financial institution in the country. I mean, bigger than the biggest bank. And that's because if we do that, we'll just have massive economies of scale, which we can pass through to members. That means our fees will be extremely low. I still think they're way too high, even though they're as low as they are. We will be a very, very large home builder, or have built tens of thousands of homes for New Zealanders. We'll be one of the biggest charities because, we give 15% of our fees to charity. We would have been a great charitable contributor. We plant a lot of trees, native trees. I'd like to think that there were literally millions of native trees that we've planted, and we have a plan for that. We'll just, I'll be able to go to Seymour Road.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to see people living with choices and dignity in their lives and just knowing that we help make that happen, and in fact, I call it the rocking chair test. Whenever we hire anyone, I say, imagine we're on a rocking chair when you're 80 and 90. What do you want to look back on? What do you want to think that your life was worth? And here is an opportunity, if you work with us, to affect a really big change in New Zealand, a really positive change in New Zealand, and all homegrown, all done by Kiwis for Kiwis. That'd be kind of cool.
Well, that is great. I'm going to leave it there, but thanks for that, and good luck with that very ambitious and, good for New Zealand goal.
We're on the journey.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
This has been Money Talks. Thanks for listening. If you've got feedback, drop me a line at liam.dan@nzherald.co.nz. Thanks to my producer, Ethan Sills, and my editor, Leanne McDonald. You can follow Money Talks on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll catch you again next week.